Hey guys, Jim here. Welcome back once again. Today we're going to take a look at something pretty outrageous, a wildly different design from anything that I've ever owned in my collection, and wildly different from most everything that Tashi has designed. That's right, this is a Tashi Bharucha design made by Reate knives called the T4000. And that is a wickedly cool spear point blade design that this thing is so close to being a dagger, it's insane. That is a very, very thin ground spine. And when you close it up, it just looks massive and it looks huge, but it still flips with authority and very little effort, as you would expect from pretty much anything Reate makes. Now, let's talk about the specs before we talk about the good and the bad. I'm just going to give you a little sneak preview. There is no bad. It's a pretty wicked cool knife. Anyway, 8.8 inches overall length. That is a big mamma jamma, and you've got a blade length of just a hair under 4 inches. It's like 3/10 of an inch shy of 4 inches. Now, the actual edge, the cutting edge, is 3.7 inches, so you lose a little bit due to the fact that it has a sweeping plunge. Notice the radius plunge here, and how it sweeps in from full blade stock thickness very gently down to the cutting edge. So your edge actually starts right there. It's a very slim blade stock. You've got M390. As we know, Reate is amazing with using very, very, very high quality materials. M390 kind of right now is the hot baby, the blade steel that so many people are really in love with right now. It's the industry darling. It's a fantastic steel. Bowler does a great job with all their steels, but M390 is awesome because it holds an edge very, very well. It's very resistant to wear, and it's extremely corrosion resistant. So if you're kind of lazy, you don't really take care of your blades all that well, this is probably going to serve you better than many others. It is a great stainless steel. From what I understand, these are Rockwell at 61 on the Rockwell hardness, so it's a good place to be. It's not going to be chippy. It's not going to tend to crack or anything like that. It's not an overly fragile, high hardness. It is going to be able to take some abuse. Not that you're really going to be, batoning this thing or really hacking at stuff, but it is going to be just soft enough to not be a brittle blade. Now, even when it's closed, it's massive. It is over 5 inches in handle length because you've got this protruding butt, and then you have the end of the handle here toward the blade comes out a little bit as well. So it measures out a little bit larger than it actually feels. It's a very tall handle, and of course a very tall blade. Really, really nicely done overall. The inlays here are done in micarta. And as you see, it is an OD green micarta. The inlays are done so well. It's almost imperceptible between the areas of titanium and the areas of the micarta. Something else that Reate does very, very well. They really mate their materials together perfectly. And another testament to that is when you first take a look at this knife, you would think that this is an integral. Yet it's not. There are two sides of titanium that are being put together here, and when you really look, you'll see the seam. But it's done so perfectly that, at least on my example, I do not feel the seam at all anywhere. And again, it's almost imperceptible. What I also like is the fact that you've got this area here for your lanyard, just kind of goes in and out through the back spacer. Not really back spacer, through the back of the titanium frame. Really, really well done. Nice thought out design. The pocket clip is meant to complement the look of the titanium as it runs through the micarta inlay there. So you'll notice that it's a perfect complement from one side to the other. The other side is just your basic titanium frame lock, all done in a nice, clean, very smooth, very high grit bead blasting. Same thing for all the exposed titanium on the presentation side. The flipper is very well done, very typical of Tashi to have this kind of squared off and very minimalistic style flipper. It's got jimping on the front there, so it's very easy to access. Your finger doesn't want to slip off. They've radiused the edges just a little bit, so it's not really going to have any sharp corners on it. Tashi's designs are unmistakable. When you look at his work, you know instantly you're looking at a Tashi design. Even though all of his knife designs are markedly different, there's always going to be a design language that speaks to the similarity. It tells you this was designed by Tashi. There'll be something in that design that you look at, no matter how different it may be from others, and you're going to go, well, it's very clear that Tashi designed that. And he's had a wonderful record with Reate knives. Reate, in my opinion, is still the top producer out of China for high-end, high-quality knives, period. Just nobody is doing it as good as Reate. Now, their prices are all over the board. You could buy an affordable Reate for, you know, 250 bucks, or you can buy more exotic, higher end, more expensive ones that'll go, you know, up to 1,000 bucks, and everything in between. But, you know, your mainstay is really going to be around that $400 price range. That'll get you into most any model that Reate makes. I love the fact that they've got that fuller running right down the separation between the two bevels, and it terminates right there. Nice sharp tip, very sharp edge, as with all Reates. I've never had an issue with even being slightly dull. You've got a nice belt satin finish on both of the bevels, and then your flats are going to be done in a bright stonewash. I'm not a big stonewash fan because a lot of knives have been coming out stonewash, but it always makes a nice complement to a secondary finish, whether that be, you know, dark acid stonewash, hand rub satin, belt satin, whatever it is. It's a nice complementary secondary tone. There's Tashi's logo. Nice clean grinds. You know, a lot of times we get caught up in wanting hand rub satin, and Reate really is doing the best hand rub satin out of China as well. As David Deng, the owner of Reate, spent several days, about a week with Todd Begg, learning, number one, how to do these sweeping plunges, but number two, how to do a nice, clean, proper hand rub satin. And on their more premium priced knives, they do that. But I have a particular love for a nice belt satin, because it shows the proficiency of whomever is grinding the knife. To have nice, clean, smooth grind lines all the way through really shows that they know what they're doing. Even pressure throughout, just really, really clean, nicely done. Now, I've used this a little bit, so there's a couple little marks, but it's not that big of a deal. I've had this ever since the Vegas show, which was the end of January 2019. And I'm just now getting around to it. This is the beginning of April, and I apologize for the delay, but this was one I didn't want to rush out, and I haven't done a lot of videos lately, but I really wanted to spend time with this and not do a quickie video. Because when you look at this knife in pictures, no matter how good the pictures are, it looks so obnoxiously huge based on its design and the height of the blade, that a lot of people think, well, that's just going to be too much for me to EDC. It's going to be big, it's going to be heavy. Now, it's only 6 ounces. I say only because a 4-inch bladed knife in a titanium frame lock, you know, you're usually between 6 and 7.5 ounces. This is at the lower end at 6.1 ounces. It's still lightweight for its size. And while it's still not a very compact knife when it's folded, if you're like me, I don't carry anything else in my knife pocket ever. For any reason, doesn't happen. So I don't care how much room it takes up in the pocket. However, I don't want something so large and obscene that I notice myself carrying it all day. I feel it in my pocket. When I sit, I hike up my leg, or I kneel down to pick something up. I don't really want to feel this big obnoxious thing in my pocket unless I'm in the mood for carrying an oversized knife. This still carries very well because it is slim in its overall thickness. The width, I really don't notice when I'm carrying it in the pocket. The pocket clip is exceptional. Just the right amount of tension to keep it from moving around or getting pushed up out of the pocket, but it's not laborious to get it in or out of the pocket. You ever see somebody where they're putting their knife in and they actually have to pry the pocket clip with their finger to put it in? I won't even own a knife that makes me do that. There's no reason ever that you should ever have to do that. This is designed properly. There's a little bit of a ramp there that when it meets the seam of your pocket, it pushes the pocket clip up, lets it go in, and it clips back down nicely with the right amount of tension. Reate has spent a lot of time working on their pocket clips to give that perfect daily carry. It's just when you don't think about how your pocket clip works and how your knife carries, then that means it was done right. Overall, the whole thing is just done magnificently. I love the fact that this side is completely free of any hardware except for the pivot. Gives it a nice clean look on the presentation side. It's nicely contoured. All the edges are radiused, even though you have these very sharp defined corners and lines and everything is very geometric, which again is something that Tashi does very, very well. He can create these geometric lines and then soften the overall knife to have more organic shapes coming out of the blades and things like that, where not many people can mix those two styles. Geometric and organic don't always flow well together, yet Tashi can do it. But even though this has such a geometric look and all these bevels and lines and edges and corners, everything is radiused nicely where there's no hot spots, nothing sticking in your hand. There's a little bit of a corner here, but even that has been radiused off in every direction so that it's not going to be uncomfortable. Now, the only way you can carry this is tip up, the proper way for a flipper, of course, and right-hand carry only. They do not make a left-handed version. Sorry, lefties, you are left out once again. As always, the action is fantastic. Using ceramic bearings and a ceramic detent reduces the friction, lets everything work very fast, very quickly. Overall, it's hard to really critique a Reate knife because they've been doing this for so long now, putting out perfect knife after perfect knife that you almost sound like a broken record. It's hard to review a lot of Reate knives because you don't appear to be a very critical reviewer because, well, all he ever says is good things. Well, the only bad thing I could say about this knife is if the style doesn't appeal to you, then that would be maybe something in the con column. But if the style didn't appeal to you, you wouldn't have bought it anyway, so it really is irrelevant at this point. Everything they do in the building of their knives, the designing of their knives, the fitting of all the components and the locks and the action, everything they do is just dead on perfect. And it's become predictable. It's become, it's one of those things where no matter what knife you buy, you're going to be happy with it. It's going to do everything that you want it to do. It's probably going to exceed your expectations to some degree. I like the ergos on this too. Notice how the frame is cut away pretty steeply here. And for a knife that looks so huge in this direction, it fits very compactly in the hand. And you notice how the blade basically drops down to where your fingers are. The whole thing is just really, really well done. Now, there are people that don't like a big fat spear point blade. Totally get you. I feel that. No worries. But for those of you that like the design, I promise you when you get your hands on one of these, you're going to be seriously impressed. It's going to be a good... I could really see this as being more of one of your hard use folders. You're not spending a tremendous amount of money. You don't have a delicate mirror polish finish or, any kind of coatings on the blade or anything. It's a nice big blade. It's a blade steel and a hardness level that can handle hard use. So when it comes down to practicality, yeah, I think you've got a practical blade style here with great blade steel. And the handle is certainly not going to, it's not going to move around in your hand at all. It pretty much locks you in right where you need to be. Sure, it'd be nice to have a little bit of jimping up here, but I don't really think that's necessary unless you're one of those tactical guys that gotta have jimping everywhere. I don't feel the need for it on every single knife in every single place. It is so thin here that you do kind of feel Your mind wants to tell you that it's sharp even though it's not. And it's not really that thin, like an unsharpened but fully ground blade. It's not like that, but you kind of feel the edges of what you would typically want to call the spine. It would have been nice maybe if that had been crowned, if that had been rounded off just a little bit, or a little micro swedge just going right down the sides. That's about the only critique I can give it, because everything else, well, they have achieved their typical level of perfection. So there you go, guys. There is a somewhat quick look at the Reate T4000. Tashi did a great job, as always, designing. Reate did a phenomenal job of execution. And I can't wait to see what they come up with next. I'll see you guys on the next video. I'm trying to pump out a few more. We'll see what happens.